Hey, this is Overpass Insights. My name's Eric. I make apps. Now today I want to talk about how much you should charge your clients and why risk is important. All right, so today I want to talk a little bit more about pricing. And this time, by pricing, I don't mean how much you should charge for your app on the App Store, although we have done that topic before, and we'll probably talk about it again. Now, today I want to talk about working for clients and how much you should actually charge your clients. Because this is a question I get a lot on this channel, either in the comments or sometimes people will email me. They'll say, Eric, I got a guy who wants me to do his app for him. How much do you think I should charge him, right? Which is really difficult to answer. Or they'll say, if you did my app for me without telling me anything else, how much would you charge? Or sometimes I've even had people call up and pretend to be clients or pretend to be prospects so they can say, oh yes, I'd like to have an app done, just so they can find out how much I would charge. I mean, one guy, he was talking to me for 5 minutes. He said, I have to be honest with you, actually. It's my brother. He needs to do an app for a friend and we don't know how much he should charge. And I was fine to tell him. I would say, okay, make sure you consider this, this, and this. So this video is kind of the same thing. I want to talk about the methodology for pricing out a client project, at least the one that I use, which might not be very orthodox because I don't know what other companies do, and some of the considerations that go into it for those of you guys who are doing it. So this is more for my fellow developers who are looking to get into client work and some of the things to think about. So now I've talked about it before. Sometimes for a project I will do the code myself, which is it's easier to quote for because I can think about how much time this will take, how much my time do I think it will take. I have to consider what the client is like. You know, are they likely to add for more scope creep? Have they asked for too much stuff altogether? And and how much testing time do I think will be needed? So it really is. So take everything you're doing and then add a significant markup on it because something might happen. Now, also a lot of the times, especially on the larger projects, we work with outsourced teams. So it's a case of, they're giving me a quote on something and the designers are giving me a quote on something and we have to coordinate all that kind of stuff. So have a look at my iPad here and I'll show you some of the different ways that we work in the past and some of the ways most of our projects work and then how some of the alternative ways of doing it. So here we got a client comes to us and says, I need this app done, or I have this requirement, or I have this business and we need an app done. How much would it cost to do it? And a lot of times it'll come to me or Rowena. It'll come through a form on our website, or they'll email, or they'll just phone up and I'll ask a few questions, arrange a phone call so we can talk about the details more specifically, and then try to give a ballpark quote, something to say, okay, based on what you said. And a ballpark quote is not after requirements gathering. It's like based on a lot of different assumptions, saying, okay, so you're saying you need this, this, and this. Will you also need this? Okay, all right. So based on that, I think it'll probably be between this value and that value. And it's different for every single project, right? So that they may agree to it, and then I'll go to the developers. And sometimes the developers will be involved in the ballpark. It depends on how quick they can be. Sometimes they ask far more questions. So sometimes I'll just do the ballpark myself, and other times they'll say, they'll get involved. And I've got my designer. We got designers on my team, but then sometimes depending on the requirements, we might need to go external to get a designer, either go to Upwork or go someplace else to get another designer. So in that case, we'll go back to the client and we'll give them the ballpark, or we'll give them the quote, and they could either say, yeah, that's fantastic, or they could say, oh, it's cheaper than I thought it would be, which is, it's kind of good and bad to hear. Like you're thinking, oh man, or they'll say, oh, it's way too expensive. And that happens from time to time. They'll say it's way too expensive. It probably happens about 40 to 50% of the time. And in that case, usually what I'll do is I'll make a secondary proposal, because it is, sometimes even I'll give a quote, like based on what they tell me. I'll be like, I'll give them a quote like this. It probably costs this, which is like, as a salesperson, it's really, really bad. So I give them an alternative way of doing it. I'll say, look, I work with offshore developers. I work with other designers, right? What if I put you in touch with them and you just work with them directly? So you could work directly with the developers that I use. I'll recommend somebody. I've got like a bunch of teams that I work with, and then I'll put you in touch with either our designers or some designers that I worked with in the past, or I can help you find somebody based on what you're looking for. And you can hire me for my time and materials, and we'll help you write the specification, and we'll help you do all that kind of stuff, and it will be a lot cheaper. So this way is much cheaper to get done. Now, do you know why that is? Because in this scenario, the customer, the client, takes all the risks of the project. And this is huge. And this is something we don't talk a lot about when we talk about quoting. We talk about how much markup you should add, or how much you should, how much testing time you should put aside, or how much you should account for scope creep, but we don't talk about the risk of the project. See, this type of project here, I assume all the risk of the project. Like if the developer gets hit by a bus, if they die, or if they're just for some reason they're unable to deliver, or they get ill, then that all falls on me. I got to find another designer. I got to find another developer, or I'm going to be in the midnight hours doing it myself. If the same thing with the designer. If the designer just flakes out, or if the designer takes too much time doing iterations, or everything the designer gives him he doesn't like, then I assume the risk of that. So this markup, my markup here has to be higher, right? And also, it's different for every project. Some projects are easy to test. You have to think about testing time too. If the interface is the same for everybody and it's just a form they fill in, it submits to the database, that's easy to test. If it's something where you have 5 different types of users or 10 different types of users, and everybody's able to customize their user interface and make it look personalized to them, then that's really hard to test. Or if you have something with GPS, and based on your GPS coordinates, then it's going to give you different feedback and stuff like that. That's difficult to test too. I mean, I know you can do all of that through the emulator and everything, but you want to do some physical testing too. And it all adds to the cost. It all adds to the risk of the project. Right, so that's always a consideration, whereas if you go into this one, basically they're hiring me for my time, right? Time and materials versus fixed price projects is a huge conversation to have, right? Ideally, you get paid for your time and materials. That way you don't assume any risk. Time and materials means the risk is all on you for hiring me. But the project-based thing, where I'm giving you a quote saying it's going to cost this much, which is pretty much the entire way that we work, means that I assume the risk of the project. So by necessity, it needs to have a certain amount of markup. So one of the things I did early on, and the reason I bring this up is early on, in the first year of doing client work, first 2 years of doing client work, I had so many projects on that I wasn't able to get back to everybody. And I had one client who said he was waiting for a quote, and I was like, the developers came back with their quote on this, and I haven't added my markup and everything to it and added it to it. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll just forward it on to you. So I forwarded it on to the client, said, don't look at the prices because, but this is everything that's going to be involved and everything, and then I'll go add the markup. And so I sent it on to him, which was just stupid. And he looked at it, and when I did my final quote, he says, Eric, your markup is huge. I thought it would be like, 8 or 10%, right? But it's huge, right? And he didn't understand how much of my time had to go into it, how much risk I was assuming in the project, right? And in the end, I told him, I'll tell you what, let me put you in touch with the developers and you could work with them directly. And it was much easier on me. I had far less stress on the project because, it was him working with the developers. If they didn't understand exactly what his requirements were, he had to do it again. If all the questions, and there's so many questions, everything that's involved, it's actually, it's not as easy as being a middleman. You have to do so much thinking, so many meetings, so many conversations, so much problem solving that, and you assume all the risks. So for my fellow app developers out there, for my fellow developers at all who are doing work for companies or whatever, or you're working in a job and you're thinking about doing work for clients, think about the risks of the project because you're assuming those. And you always have to think about, you want to make sure that you have enough in your markup to manage the risks if they come up, but not so much that you price them out and they don't want to go with you as a developer. So anyway, let me know what you guys think, if you agree, disagree with the way that I do things, or if this is useful at all, because this is a bit nerdy. This is a bit nerdy even for us nerdy people. So so don't forget to like and subscribe if you made it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like. We're not doing the live stream tonight because I've got some stuff to do, but I do hope you guys have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you again on Monday.